Okay, the time's 9 o'clock. We'll call the finance meeting to order. Lori, can you please call the roll?
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Clarence Campbell,
Here.
Dick Pufall,
Here.
Brad Ray,
He's excused.
Ron Stendor.
Here.
Okay, next item is to approve the agenda. Will somebody like to make a motion?
Ron will make a motion. We approve the agenda.
I'll
I'll
second.
second that motion.
Okay. Okay, Ron and Dick make the motions. Any debate? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next up is public comment. Is there any public comment? Is there anybody online for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Approval of the minutes for January 22nd.
Ron will make a motion. We approve the minutes of January 22nd.
Pat will second.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, Rod and Pat make the motions. Any debate? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next up is election of chair. Do we have any nominations for chair?
This is Dick Pufall. I'll nominate Pat Kinney.
Ron Stender would second that.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll vote on motion for the chair. All in favor, Mr. Kinney being chair?
Aye.
All right, congratulations, Mr. Kinney, meeting's yours.
Next, we'll move to the election of vice chair, nominations for vice chair.
Yeah, this is Dick Pufall to nominate Ron Stendor.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Any other nominations for vice chair? All in favor of Ron being vice chair?
Aye.
Wait a second. Aye. All in favor of Ron being vice chair? Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, I don't
Aye.
think motions for, 'cause they don't need a second. The last meeting we had was in January. February got canceled because we had some people that couldn't make it. But in January, we were talking about, on October 28th, when we passed the budget, the debt levy worksheet, we had some questions there. So if we can go back to that to try to understand that. And now we have a finance director. And so hopefully by the time we're done with this topic today, she fully understands it so that going forward, she'll keep us on the straight and narrow.
Dan, do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah, can we pull up the October 28th, item 6K?
Sure. Dan, do you have that? I can,
Yeah, I'm looking for it right now.
I think I sent it to you in an email too, like the way it was presented and the corrected.
Okay, I don't have my email with me on here, so,
Hang on, let me see. I can find it.
okay.
I just get into mine and go to my sent. Let's see. Oh, let's see. So here, Dan, am I able to share?
I'll make it so you can. Okay,
So let me see here. So I believe this is the one, Pat, that you're referring to that showed this $68,000 number sitting over here.
Right, right.
Yeah. And I will just say that I was focused on the current year budget, the 26, and I did not update the library levy over here and the actual levy amount. That was my bad. I didn't do that because this is not correct that it's 68,000. And what I will do is I will put it side by side with the corrected one, which I do have for you. Hang on one second here. So you can see them. And I'd be happy. I did share these with Dan and Heather. I don't know. It doesn't look like they're in the packet, but let me just get things set up here. So let me make this. I apologize. This is going to be probably small on your screen, but the one on the left is the original one. And then the one on the right is going to be the corrected one. And as you can see, there is no amount there. You levied your max levy in 2024 for your 25 budget. The columns on the sheet on the left were not correct. As you can see, I updated the library levy amount to the 185,997, and the correct levy limit amount was put in here, so they match, and you were at zero. You took everything you could, and that was my error. I take responsibility for that.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. My understanding would then be when we approve the carryover at the October 28th meeting, we're actually good on leaving it as is with the state?
Correct. Yeah. So I think and I thank you for reading it, Pat, because you would have been correct had the sheet not been an error on my part. Why would we leave that on the table if we weren't taking the full amount in that year? I think is where you were going with it. Are we in the same spot we were in? And this year, when we get your levy limit form, there should be no prior year carry forward available to you because you took everything you could take.
Okay, yep, that was the reason for my question. And then for a couple of you that weren't here when we had the finance meeting before we passed the budget in October, I had a tooth out in stitches and the dentist told me not to talk for a few days. So I really couldn't ask and say some things I wanted in that meeting. So we had Blake run the meeting, but we got the carryover into the budget, but I really couldn't ask more than trying to get that done. So
Yep.
Can we look at the levy limit worksheet? I want to ask Carolyn if this all makes sense to her.
Yep. So hang on here.
As we hand things off to her at some point in the future.
So here I will put the 24 levy limit worksheet, which will match then the right side. So if you look, 9052 is your levy limit here allowable. It does match over here. There were amounts here that we took in 2025. It ended up being 48,000. It got increased a little bit just due to the carry forward amounts being increased. But we did take this amount, and I think I don't want to speak for Carolyn, but her and I did go over this and I explained it to her. And I have to give her credit. She did on her own initiative for your capital improvement worksheet. She put a formula on there that would calculate, because one of our requirements is we have to be at the same amount or lower than your 12/31/25 debt service outstanding balance on 12/31/26. And she already added that to your worksheet, which I thought was good. I didn't ask her to do that. She just did that on her own. So I took that she got the gist of our conversation, but I'll let her speak.
Okay, so then if we're all on the same page, barring something happening with how we're funded and levy limits, et cetera, or a pile of money falling into our lap unexpectedly that's rather large, we want to use the full allowable levy each year so that we keep that base. Is that our understanding?
That would be correct, yes.
And so as we go through the budget, and if it's seems like every year, we get down towards the end and you have to look for things to get us to that point. Let's say one department says, I can live without this and it's $500, but now that puts you, say, $200 under. We'd still want to levy the full amount. And
unfortunately, that is the advice I would give you, because the game that has been set up, I'll call it that, by the state, is that if you don't do that, you're putting yourself behind in the overall scheme of things if you don't take your allowable increase.
Okay, and then we keep working on net new construction to build the base. And as we build the base, it makes sense to make full use of that base.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I think we're all on the same page on that topic. Okay. So then, Steve, should we move on to the other things that you want to cover today?
Sure. I'll stop sharing there, I think. And the budget report that is before you, Caroline and I went over that, and we actually did it, I think, last Wednesday, and then there were a couple entries to be made, and she updated the report after those entries were made for April. And so in addition to going over that levy limit stuff and the carry forward, we're also working with her to show her how to do these types of things. And, you know, she's a very good student. She's catching on very quickly. No concerns there at all. Very pleased. So, just to kind of go over your report, and certainly if, you know, there are questions, please let me know or speak up or whatever you'd like to do. You know, it's through April. I would say though that highway is still behind a couple months. I think, Carolyn, you can kind of remind me, but I think this was like through February, basically. So there's a couple months that weren't done yet from the County Road and Bridges Fund and the Highway Internal Service Fund numbers basically that you're seeing on this report is what I'm referring to. And the difference is in your general fund, if you look, the actual year to date is 1,477,000, and it's up on top, Dan, there for revenue. And the revenue last year was 4,999. I believe the majority of that was due to that aid that you received for that Sanborn tax issue. With the way that was being handled, that skewed things because it didn't happen this year like it did then. And I think the other issues, I'm not sure on human services. We didn't delve into that a lot, but it looks like they're a unique animal from the standpoint of they're still reporting things probably yet today for 2025. We have to cut off on the books at a certain point, and so some of that will end up being prior year and some of it current year. And so I think part of that is that net transaction, however that goes. But otherwise, I think everything else is flowing like you would normally see in a given year. Nothing really outstanding. There is a new grant there, that CDBG rehabilitation grant, which is a transitional housing project, I believe. 950,475. And there's also an expense line for that same thing on the bottom. That's a new thing. There was no budget for that because it either wasn't anticipated or was received after the fact. So no budget numbers there to match up to that. Yes.
Steve, I can address that. That's a pass-through loan.
Okay.
It's for the homeless shelter for everyone.
Oh, so you're just getting the money and sending it through.
Right. So it's just a pass-through.
Okay.
And the
Gotcha.
total is going to be around 1.6 million when it's done.
Okay. Yeah, so that makes sense because the revenue and the expense are the same. So you got it and you sent it through like you were supposed to. Are there any questions on revenues on the top? I mean, obviously this is summarized. We do have detailed reports too that we can, could share if there were other questions. It's just kind of to boil it down to a one pager that we end up with this summary information. Hearing none, I guess on the expense side, things look to be tracking very close to what you would expect to see year over year, with the exception of you'll see the capital funds. That has to do with just how you're spending the funds, that you borrow. So you borrow in December for your next year's capital items. Last year it was a lot less. I presume some of those projects weren't completed by April. They just occurred later in the year. This year, things are happening quicker. So I think that's the only explanation there. Otherwise, everything looks like it's tracking very normally, like you'd expect in any given year. Questions? Caroline, did you have anything you wanted to add or?
No, I think you got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Other questions from the committee at all? All right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thank you.
So next we will go to the capital budget, item E for forestry.
So Caroline did for your, if you want to look at it two ways. One, you can look at the individual departments, or you can look at it as overall. So Caroline put an overall picture together for you guys to look at. But we can go straight to forestry so you guys can see that. So I don't know if Chris is on the line. If not, okay. So I can go through it. So the $50,000 he has there for land improvements, honestly, we don't know what that number is. That's a guess. That's for dredging out, was it Second Landing? We have the permit to do it, but we cannot find a contractor to do it. So, and then we have the question is, do we want to do it this year where people are already complaining like crazy? Or do we want to wait till next year? So that's what that $50,000 is for. Really, it might cost more, it might cost less. We don't know because we can't get somebody to bid on it. So the $8,500 is for their heavy duty truck. They have like an F-350. And then 3,000 is the other equipment. So that's all their request is. So I would say we could approve the vehicle purchase and the other equipment, but leave the 50,000 out until we know what's going on.
So my question on the dredging, if they can't find a contractor, and it doesn't look like it's likely this year.
Yeah.
You know, in 2026, but if they do find someone and they say, hey, you know, we can come over and do this. If we don't have it in the budget, I mean, we could come back and take it out of contingency.
We could take it out of contingency, or we could take it out of interest on, which I'll go through later. A good example is the LATCF fund. We have almost $129,000 in interest accrued on that. So we could still keep the balance and use the interest to pay for some of these other things that we don't want to, that we don't have the money to pay for. So that's one option. And we have a couple other funds like that. So I would say we just defer the 50 grand until we know more.
So we have a cap on how much we can put on the debt levy this year. Do we have an idea of how close we're going to be to that at this point?
I'm guessing we're at least, there's still numbers waiting for, so I'm guessing we're gonna be at least $500,000 over in requests. So we're gonna have to say no to some of the requests.
Gary?
I just want to talk about this dredging for a moment. I think we need to look at this really seriously because we're talking about Lake Superior. We could dredge that till hell freezes over and it's still going to blow back in. So this is an idea of somebody's got to tell us, okay, what exactly do you think you're doing out there? The boats are maintaining their ability to get in and out now. They've kind of figured out how to get around some of the shallow stuff. They're struggling. I understand that. But we have no clue what that would cost. And then how long is it good for? I think we need to ask the companies that are bidding it, you know, what's your experience with Lake Superior? Because if we spend, and we're not spending just $50,000 to get a dredging unit in there, I'm almost sure. But once we find out what these bids would be and what they're exactly doing, there's no guarantee that next year the winds don't shift and we blow it all right back in. So I think we have to know what we're doing and what the cost is, because when you look at the work we do over on Madeline Island for putting rock, you're talking about a contractor who has to haul the rock to her and lay it, and it gets pretty expensive. So I think dredging is a question I don't know the answer to, but I think the whole committee, the boards need to say, okay, how much money are we really gonna spend? And it's next year, maybe it's shot again. I don't know. But the winds shift all the time on Lake Superior. The height of the water goes up and down on Lake Superior. I don't know how much money we want to put into dredging that boat landing and then next year find out, geez, it's too bad for us. We just spent all this money and it's right back to where it is. Like I say, I'm not the expert, but it'll be interesting that one bidder we potentially have, what they think they can do and can't do and what is the cost. Because I don't believe 50,000 is going to get you much dredging, but let's find out what the contract is.
I mean, Chairman Merton's correct. We could have one storm and all the silt and sand comes right back in. You know,
Well, when this came up last year, the lake level was on the low side, the very low side due to lack of rain. So the lake level runs in cycles. And so, you know, part of it might be if we get back to more average, we're good for at least a few years on this. But then with the city doing the boat landing in the park there by the marina, that's for bigger stuff. But maybe we'd look at all the boat landings with access to the lake and what it costs for maintenance and dredging and what size boats. I don't have a good enough handle because I don't have a boat on the different places you put in a boat and what serves what. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm okay with this coming out of the budget for now, but I guess I would say to forestry, because we asked them a year ago to get a permit and look at dredging this, that we at least ask them to continue to keep an eye out for a contractor. But then if we do find someone, that we consider it, but we should talk to the city with all the access points.
well, I know Chris is talking to one contractor out of the UP, and one of the local residents has been talking to a different contractor. So, and I referred him to Chris. So we might find one, but then the question Chairman Mertig brought up, is it worth doing, is the next one. This committee and the entire board has to decide. So,
And with what the city's doing down in the park with boat landings, the one that was there and then the new one, I really don't know how, you know, all the landings we have and what size boats they serve. I don't have enough information to know if it's worth investing in this or if that need can be met somewhere else. I don't know.
I know at second landing, they call it, you're not gonna put any big boats in there now. It's just mostly smaller fishing vessels.
Right.
I have a 27-footer, no way to put it in there.
But they can put it in down in,
Yeah, there's within the city here, there's plenty
Right.
of like Career Park and, you know, the new marina, and so.
so if that serves the need, then from a tax dollar perspective, which shows up on the tax bill, no matter if it's city or county, we could put this on the back burner.
Yeah,
Okay. Do you want a motion to take this out of the budget, but let forestry know to still keep an eye out for someone?
yeah, I do. I think for now, that's the best move. We could always, if we know more come September, we can always add it back in if we want to.
We had a forestry meeting yesterday and Chris said that, and I have it in my notes at home, but the permit is good, I think through 2027, and he thought he could get it extended a few years if need be.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So we just be approving, was it $12,000?
So for the forestry budget, we're looking at the balance, and that 3,500 is for a trailer.
There's no, Chris is just asking for 8,500 for the lease on his truck.
But the other equipment is a trailer, correct?
Yeah, I think so. So that's a total of 12,000, 13,000, 12,000.
So last year when we went through this early, we went through them, had conversations. We didn't necessarily approve them because it's an initial discussion.
Yeah, I just think 12,000 is easy enough to approve, but if you want to wait, that's fine.
The committee wanted to remove the 50,000 at this point,
Well, 12.
remove the 50 to
Yeah.
get us down to 12.
sounds good.
You want to make a motion then?
I make a motion that we do away with the 50,000 and go with the 12,000 for the forestry department.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Then next, we'll go to the Health and Human Services Department budget. Oh, I'm sorry, was I misled? After forestry, I'm looking at Health and Human Service. Okay. On that one. Okay.
Are we jumping to IT then? Well, because there's IT down after highway also. Because I didn't make one for just Health and Human Services. I didn't need one for that, so.
I was just looking at the agenda. It doesn't matter to me, but if you want to stay on that same spreadsheet. On that spreadsheet, okay.
Austin, why don't you go ahead and explain what you're looking for? Bearing in mind, like I said earlier, we're $500,000 over on requests. So there's gonna be cuts some.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'll do my best to speak to sheriff's items too. Taylor unfortunately isn't here today. But from my side, we're mostly looking for the like standard items like computer replacements. The major thing on all these items though is that the prices have gone up significantly due to AI data center demands. The prices of RAM and hard drive storage have gone up anywhere from 200 to 400%. So that's why if you see my computer replacements at 47,600, it's quite literally the same amount as previous years, like multiplied by 1.7, as that's like the real-time prices of those computers. So it's not any more computer replacements. We've been on a cycle of replacing about a quarter of the computers in the county each year, because the warranties for them are about 4 to 5 years. So that way it's a consistent annual amount and we're not replacing them all at once. So, and then other than that, the server replacements that I have are for highway and conservation servers specifically. They're long overdue and we've been pushing them for other projects. Taylor and I talked about this the other day, but there's a server at highway that is a 2014 model. So those kind of things we like to replace as it's long out of warranty. And then there were other items that were originally scheduled for, or Rachel had previously budgeted for this year, like AV equipment for courtrooms, and that we pushed to 2028, just due to all the other things already in the budget.
So I noticed the phone center system, we don't have a number yet. Do you have any clue how much that's gonna be?
I do not. I imagine it will be in the range of $100,000. And that is because our current phone provider, Mitel, is no longer providing any updates or service after 2028.
Okay.
So the equipment for the boardroom here, you have that on there. Is there, to me, it seems that we had an issue here at a planning meeting a while back in March.
That was a Zoom issue. That wasn't a, oh, that
Okay.
was actually was a service. Yeah.
But,
That's
you
a-
know, other than that, I mean, does it really need to be replaced?
No, and that's why we pushed the audio video equipment for both this room and the courtrooms, is because they are working currently. And this one, the actual audio receiver, like we just recently had work done on because of the previous issues. So those I think would be okay. If we're going to push any projects, then I would say those ones. Because, you know, like as long as they're working and we're not having any significant issue, and I haven't heard of any issue with the courtroom audio video either.
So potentially a year from now, we might consider pushing it another year.
Yeah, I think that would make sense if it continues to work. I mean, and those prices are a little less variable than like our PC and like server prices. But I worry about those failing less than our more critical equipment like servers and backups and things like that.
So you said the equipment you're multiplying by 1.7 in real time. So by the time you actually get around to buying this, are you anticipating it'd be more expensive, or what you're looking at now in the budget, what you anticipate prices being roughly at the time of purchase?
That's what we can see right now. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do to predict further increases. I mean, we already were not expecting, 200 to 300% increases on the like RAM and storage for PCs. I will say our vendors used to be able to provide us like a month, on a quote that it would be good for. That's no longer the case. It's that day and it can change the next day. They can't provide any guarantees on those quotes anymore. And our PC equipment, we get a little bit of a break from our primary vendor, CDW government, because there is Wisconsin, like county government pricing and stuff like that. So that helps out a little bit, but I mean, even they can't, there's nothing they can do to predict the prices, and it would take me a really long time to explain it, but the short version is AI data centers are reserving capacity for production that hasn't even happened yet. So it's hard to predict, it could be the case that demand lessens and they no longer reserve the chips that they're reserving right now, and it could increase.
So budget will get passed in late October. Between now and then, are you anticipating reviewing these numbers to see how?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
they may be higher.
Correct.
So the reason I'm asking that is if we know we already have to come up with 500,000 or so, we might need more wiggle room on this later. So
Yeah, and just an example, the backups at Human Services, I had a quote from December 2025 that was $14,000. By time we were able to approve it in April and move forward with it, it was $28,000. So it had doubled.
I mean, prices may get better in the future. I mean, they're still building that TSMC plant in Arizona. But I don't think that comes online until 28 or something.
Anybody have any interest in modifying this budget?
It's just a question. Is there any sense of what 2026 requests were versus 27? I mean, obviously we must be higher, but is there a sense of how much higher we are? There's no 26.
Go back.
Carla, you want to get your mic in?
Yes, in 26, it was about 376.
So
Yeah.
Yes, like for example, the conservation and highway servers that I mentioned, we originally planned to do this year, but we've already had to push them to 27 because of the increases.
I would recommend you just postpone any action on this.
The recommendation is to leave this budget as is.
No, to postpone it. Just take no action on it and review it
We'll
later.
leave it as. No.
No, just table it.
So which one do you have next on the list then?
I believe highways next. Yeah. This narrative I'll put on the, okay, here's his. So Matt, you want to start?
So in the packet, we have our capital improvement budget. I also included a budget narrative with that. For 2027, we have $678,000 in vehicle replacements, which them are paid through operations, so they are not through levy, debt levy. And then for road and bridge construction, $1,617,000. And that would be for resurfacing 3.3 miles of County Highway F. We do have a LRIP grant of 262,580. The remainder would be the responsibility of the county. My proposal is to have 1.3 million in debt levy, the 262,000 in LRIP, and then about $55,000 out of our improvement fund balance for that project. I don't know,
What's the balance of your improvement fund?
it took a pretty big hit last year.
Yeah, I know.
Projected balance after 2026 is $278,000. And that's still up in the air as we have not received bids yet for County Highway GG, so we do not know where that project will fall. That is, I believe it bids on around the 14th. I don't remember exactly what day.
Okay.
What the committee, would you like me to go through my proposed equipment? So a plow truck, we are anticipating about $370,000. If you remember from last year, we started building our own plow trucks. We have not currently finished the first one. I think it's pretty close on track. We're at about 500 hours. We're hoping to get it done in that 600 plus hours. The box is currently at Ashland Industry for painting, and it's been there for some time. They have not got that done yet. Once that comes back, we've probably got about 200 hours. So overall, I think it's going very well. It's just, yeah, some hangups on scheduling. So we do have the 26 truck is in stock. We do not have all the parts and pieces yet, but once that last year's gets finished, we will be starting on that. So I think that's going to work out well and save us some dollars. We also have,
Matt, if I remember correctly, it took over a year for the private contractor to do it.
yeah, they were a year to 2 years out to get a build on that. So, you know, we decided to change stream, you know, back in the end of October. By the time we got all our parts and pieces this winter and got working on it, you know, we're trying to work on it around our regular maintenance and equipment that we're working on. So, I believe it's working out well. It's working to fill in when we have time, we work on it. If we have other stuff, we can leave it sit. So, yeah, I think that is going to work out well. We are proposing, you know, with that, we have a number 57 is, that's got a cracked frame and a lot of other issues. It's a 1999 to get rid of that. So, we're trying to upgrade that older fleet that we have. We have a supervisor truck for our patrol superintendent. Estimated at 58,000. We would trade in a older pickup out of the fleet, so about $50,000 for that. Proposing to purchase a mini excavator. So one of the big requests we get, or I don't know if to say requests, but issues is cleaning the ditches. Private individuals have driveways and with the culvert in them, and they're responsible for their driveway. If their driveway culvert fails, they're responsible for the cost to replace that. Well, some of the problem why they fail is when our ditches hold water, they fail sooner than they should, and we get some complaints about that. So that's one of the things a mini excavator could do. Right now we have only steel tracked excavators, and they're harder on the asphalts and they're harder to get moved around. we would like to get a mini excavator with a ditching bucket. And then also with that, we would get a brush cutting head. We, a lot of the maintenance around our bridges and our culverts, they do not get cut because we don't have a machine to cut them. I mean, we do it by hand at some point, but this would help us to better maintain the bridges and culverts and some of the steeper slopes where, you know, you can't get a, say like a skid steer with the brush head on it. They're too steep, so you could work from the bottom or the top. You know, they're too steep even for a guy to stand on some of them. So that would be helpful for us. And then the last one is a replacement vehicle for HHS. So in this, we initially had talked about, we have Unit 120, it's a 2020 Ford Edge, I believe, to trade that in for a minivan. HHS has come back in the last day or so and said, you know, being that a minivan is about $10,000 more than an SUV, they would be willing to change that, you know, drop that to a SUV, which would be a savings of about 10,000. I guess, you know, we've been doing this now since 2020. From Highways End, it's working out well. We purchased the vehicle. We charge them 45 cents a mile for usage on that vehicle. We take care of all the maintenance and the fuel, insurance, everything is all paid through by highway. So Unit 120 that we would like to trade in, it's a 2020 Ford Edge. It's got about 80,000 miles on it now. In the time frame since we had it up until 4/1, that with the mileage that brought in revenue of 30,500. We have some maintenance costs, and so our revenue from that is $15,536. So we're expecting to get about $10,000 in trade-in. So that would pay for that initial cost, was about $24,000 for that vehicle. So yeah, basically going this route, we purchase the vehicle, they pay for the usage, and you know, by the time we get to the end of that vehicle lifespan that we're going to use it, it has paid for itself.
Gary, two quick, easy questions.
Sure.
Why is the supervisor truck 18,000 more this year than next year?
We traded in a newer vehicle this year. We had we traded in a vehicle with less mileage. We're trading in one of the older ones out of the fleet that is getting, I think we have a 2014 Dodge that we want to trade in, that the value is a lot less.
Okay, so the one for 27, you're going to trade an older vehicle on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and then in 28, potentially in 29, 30, and 31, you're going to.
We would trade in a newer vehicle that has more value.
Okay, then I would just need to get something straight. The mini excavator, we're not doing private drives.
No, we
Okay.
would be cleaning the ditches along, you know, the county highways, the state highways.
Okay.
So they drain better, and therefore it would benefit the private drive people. Their driveway culverts would hopefully last a little longer. Not, you know, if they sit water in it, they tend to rust out and fail sooner.
Okay, and then if that on a county road, state highway, that's a little different maybe, but on a county road, if the culvert's bad, the landowner pays for a new culvert, right?
Correct. And it's same on a state highway. The only time that the county or state pays for a private drive is if we're coming through with a project like a road rebuild and we're changing the ditch grades, then the culverts get replaced as part of the project. But otherwise, they are the responsibility of the landowner.
Dan?
So just a few questions. So how many pickup trucks do you have?
How many pickup trucks do we have?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know that off the top of my head. I mean, there's well, commissioner, patrol superintendent, shop superintendent, and the foreman all have a pickup. And then there's a couple of them in the fleet that we use for flagging vehicles.
So like 8 or 9, something like that.
So probably 6 to 7.
And then the mini excavator.
Mhm.
So how often would you actually use that?
I believe we would use it a fair amount, you know, some for the ditching, but a lot for brushing. One of the things we spent the last 5 or 6 years cutting the right of way back on Highway GG. There were all large diameter trees. We cut it back to 40 feet from the center line. And we used a big excavator with a shear head, and we dropped them up out to the road and picked them up and chipped them. So what's happening now is all the stumps are left in place. So we've tried to go in, now it's growing brush, you know, we need to cut the brush back. We've tried to go in with a skid steer with our brush head, and it just really just tears the tracks right off the machine. It cuts them, the stumps are too hard. So this machine would allow us to sit, you know, in the ditch or outside of the stump line and clean that brush out. So I believe we would use it a lot.
What, does that 200,000 include the shear head?
That includes, it's the machine, the buckets and the brush head, all included, yes.
So on that mini excavator, you know, on the one hand, you know, I know they're handy.
Mhm.
My concern is we have a focus on the culverts, which clearly aren't our responsibility.
Mhm.
And we're not bringing in revenue for doing that unless it's in our highway maintenance agreement. Do you have on the state road, would the state reimburse you anything under a highway maintenance agreement for doing the work you're proposing?
Yes, any work done on the state highway would be billed out at the set rate for that machine.
And so with the highway maintenance agreement, there's a limit to the funding that you
There
have
is.
available.
Yes.
So for the work that you need to do for the state, under the agreement that you have, how much money do you anticipate having left to do work in the ditches, including work such as this?
It all varies on the winter time. If we have a hard winter, there's not a lot of funding left unless they do extra contracts, which they do at times. But if we have an easier winter, then there's a fair amount of money to be spent on summer maintenance items. Another thing to consider, we are taking over maintenance of the town of Marengo, so this would also benefit some of the work there, changing the small culverts and doing some of the work that will be required for that contract also.
So you have a skid steer with a brush head when you do brushing?
We do
in the
have one,
ditch.
yes.
Do you ever end up renting equipment for brushing?
We have in the past, it's been a few years. We have been using our own the last probably 4 or 5 years. In the past, we did rent it. The rate was so that we would lose money on our machine just because it's very hard on them. It's a, you know, it takes a lot of out of them. It wrecks the tracks. If you hit something, it can get expensive. You break parts and pieces on the mower head. So we did rent them, but the last few years we have been using our own equipment for that.
So I went to Butternut yesterday for a forestry meeting. Hadn't been down to Butternut in that way for a while, partly because the road is so bad that way, or other ways. But it really struck me how the northern half of the county and the ditches is brushed more so than the southern half. So in terms of priorities and funding available, we're talking Highway 1, Highway 13 here. When I see areas in the southern half that to me look like they're well overdue for brushing, I don't understand why we haven't brushed that more than we have, and yet we're talking about a mini excavator and touching up around culverts as far as available funding and priorities.
So, I mean, you're correct. There's the section from Glidden to Butternut that we've been working our way south as funding allows with the brush cutting. But you know, once they're larger trees, it's more expensive. And then the other issue is if you don't maintain the portion that you already finished, like the north portion, we have to go through every 3 to 4 years and brush it again. Otherwise, pretty soon we're going to be back to big trees that cost 2 or 3 times the amount to remove. So it's a kind of works against itself. You know, what we started on the north half, we have that done, but we still need to go in and maintain it. So then it gives less money to make better progress on the southern portion.
So my thought on this at the moment is you've got a bunch of road that needs brushing. I would like to understand how much money we have from the state to do brushing there and what equipment is most appropriate, whether we own it or rent it. Because it seems like there's more bang for the buck, both in terms of equipment and manpower, because there's so much brushing in places to do that we're behind on. And I agree with you, as the more that grows, the harder it is. I completely agree with that.
Yes.
So to me, the mini excavator with a focus on touching up around culverts seems like, from all the brushing that I saw yesterday that needs to be done, it seems like a lower priority. I would like to better understand how your highway maintenance agreement funding can be used, or how you come up with a priority of the mini excavator and time doing that work around culverts versus the brushing, where some of that clearly is getting to a point where it's going to get more expensive to do. It seems the priorities, I don't understand the priority with the mini excavator. The other thing on the mini excavator is, and I'm also thinking about our budget that we have to pass on the limit on what we can have on the debt levy this year, and we've got to find ways of trimming things. You know, for 200,000, most of our accounts are earning 3%, so the math is pretty easy. We could earn 6,000 a year in interest, and you could use that for renting a piece of equipment.
Just to clarify, this equipment does not go on the debt levy. It comes out of his equipment fund. So there's no,
Do you have sufficient revenue to fully fund that mini excavator from the equipment fund?
I believe so, yes.
And with everything else that you want to purchase?
Mm-hmm. We tried to keep that around that 600,000 number. It's a little bit higher when we added in the HHS car this year, but we're shooting for around 600,000 ish to for our equipment revenue.
So you think it fully funded through the equipment revenue?
yeah, everything's fully funded through the equipment revenue. So this does not hit debt levy. So it is, I think the reasonable question to ask is, what is the future price of vehicles going to be? We already know that tariffs have hit all vehicle parts dramatically, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So do we want to keep money in the equipment fund for future increases or not? And I don't know. I mean, my preference is to table this one after you're done with your questions and come back next month to come up with more questions, and we can email the Matt beforehand, and that way he's prepared.
Do you know what it would cost to rent one of these for a week or so?
For a mini excavator, I do not know off the top of my head, but probably, well, just with a bucket is, I would say, in that $5,000 range. I don't know, but with a brush head, then if you could even get one, you probably cannot. I don't know the availability of something like that.
So in the minivan, my first question is, does HHS, are they asking for a different vehicle?
They, a conversation we had this week, Terry said, being that the minivan is about $10,000 more than a small SUV that like we've been purchasing, she would be fine with, going with that SUV, same size vehicles they have. Well, actually, the first ones we got were them Ford Edges. We went up, which are Escape. They're pretty small. We went up to a little bit bigger size SUV. They were having trouble fitting multiple car seats in the back seat. It's just too narrow. So we went to I think an Equinox size, which fits a little bit better. But the thought was is to get a minivan to have that third row seating for larger families. But, you know, Terry said they can work around it. They can use two vehicles if needed in that case, you know, for that $10,000.
Did the conversation for a new vehicle start with HHS saying we would like something different than we have, or are you initiating that?
So
We initiated it though, because yeah, there's actually, there's still one, like, we were supposed to replace this car in 2020. 5, but it got pushed off when we started talking about the roof and to get done this year. So, this is now being pushed
Yeah.
off to 2027. So we did initiate, because the original plan was when we purchased these vehicles, 5, that we would replace them about every 5 years. And now this one's 6 years old. So then next year it'll be 7.
So backtracking on vehicles, and you're gonna have to remind me, because 6 years ago, there was so much trying to figure out how to survive financially here. But if my recollection is correct, the previous administrator suggested that these be in the highway department because of service and maintenance. And I don't remember offhand if highway purchased those by money coming out of your budget. And I don't know that we've tracked how well that's worked out. I know going 18 miles or so for an oil change,
yeah,
that
So-
doesn't strike me as, from a taxpayer standpoint, the best thing. So the reason I'm asking this is if the vehicle's fine for them now and they're not, and if it's meeting their needs, looking forward, we've gone to leasing vehicles since highway was asked to have these vehicles. We've gone to leasing. If we replace that vehicle, would we look at leasing a vehicle? And that's a question for.
So we did a comparison on leasing versus purchasing. The sheriff's department is looking to lease a minivan with a monthly cost of about $1,005. So that brings that total cost of that vehicle to about $60,300. If we were to purchase it and we were looking at, say we went to just borrow money, not using highway funds, you know, paying a bank 6% interest, we'd have a monthly payment of $941. And then, so that's a total of $56,960. But then we have, roughly after 5 or 6 years, we'd have $14,000 in trade-in value, brings the total cost of that vehicle down to $42,960. So about 17 or 18,000 less to own it over leasing. There is, I know the leasing companies pays for some of that maintenance for the you know, the oil changes and such, but to me, it doesn't look like the numbers add up to lease a vehicle. We're better off to purchase it. As I said, with Unit 120, after all the costs over the years that we've had that vehicle since 2020, which it did hit a deer, so we had a little extra cost in that. And I think 2 or 3 windshields were broken, so there was extra cost over and above your normal maintenance costs. So with that, we had a profit of $15,536, and with the trade-in value of $10,000, that covers the cost of that vehicle. You asked how that vehicle was bought. So back in 2020, my recollection, it was bought on debt levy, but after that fact, you know, Mike and Steve looked at it and they said we did not need to use debt levy. We ended up paying back all that debt levy for a certain amount of years, about $1 million. So it came out of our budget.
So Dan, with our other vehicles that we lease, where's the maintenance being done, including oil changes?
The sheriff's department does it locally.
All of the maintenance?
Yeah, well, if there's things like oil changes and that they do here, if they have a major repair, like a brake job or like the car hits a deer or something, they go to highway for that. But basic maintenance is done in town at local deal or around the county at local places, wherever the deputies may be. But I had a question about the vehicle too, because, you know, just so the committee knows, can you explain what the HHS vehicle is actually used for? Because I think that might change how they view this vehicle.
Yes. And actually, we had a discussion yesterday, so I'm gonna bring it up now too. We actually kind of want to add a fourth vehicle, so I might ask Dan if we can bring that on to the agenda for next month. But what they're used for is all of the programs, if they're transporting a client at all, they get first priority of the 3 vehicles that we have. So then they could bump somebody that might be just driving somewhere, but they try to use it for, they're going to a conference out of town. If they're, public health uses it a lot in there for going and doing water tests. So they're all over the county. They're out on that on island. Same thing with Teo with the safety, or the, going visiting all the vendors and stuff. So it's used a lot in the summer from those departments as well. But then all year round, all of the service facilitators or case managers that are going out and meeting clients, they are taking the vehicles. And on most days, all 3 are taken. And that's what it brought up at our managers meeting yesterday, that the one program that could use it more, but a lot of times gets bumped or there's not a car, is our CCS program and our CLTS programs. And those are, we get fully reimbursed for them. So that's where I thought was, well, maybe we add another vehicle, because then they would be able to cover those costs through the mileage rate. So that we'd have all 4 cars being used. It's cheaper instead of paying out on these programs, the 70, or what are we at, 77, 75 cents, we're paying 45, which we're talking about because of the cost of the vehicles going up, making it up to 50 cents. And then we always check that to make sure that they're not losing money or, making a lot of money. It's checked annually. Marcy and I always talk about it to make sure, do we need to change the rate for the next year or mid-year? And already talked about maybe with gas prices, we might have to increase it. So there's always a communication with that, but it's still saving 25. If we go up to 50 cents, it's still saving 25 cents a mile for what we're paying on these programs. And then that money can get spent on other items that could help these clients in those programs. So and then with their doing the maintenance, it really is a lot easier for us. Bob is tracking it when it needs to be done, mileage, like he'll just come up and get it. We block it off for that afternoon or morning that he's coming. Or if somebody's coming from Ashland, they'll pick up the vehicle and bring it down there. So they try to use it with their towns to Ashland too. So it's not like they're not being efficient, but we talked about, would it be worth it for us to purchase a vehicle outright? And honestly, by the time we would purchase a vehicle, then I would have to get a gas card, have that other bills and doing it that way, and also paying for the maintenance. It just makes sense to keep doing what we're doing because it is working so well. So we like it, and I would like to keep doing it this way. And we have, like Herm and I have talked about leasing, I don't know, a few times in the last 5 years, and it hasn't made sense yet. Say that someday it won't, but. So
Yep. One of the considerations when we first went to vehicles, county-owned vehicles, that before that, it was all private, that they used employees and paid them mileage. But when they're transporting, the public and especially minors, it, puts a lot of liability onto them employees.
that's why those ones, when they definitely get the vehicles, that's where somebody could get bumped if
So-
they're transporting.
Is anybody tracking the, so if it's an HHS vehicle, they're out on San Bernardino Avenue, it's got to be 18 miles down to the county garage each way. So we've got staff time. They're doing this on their work hours. We've got staff time coming and going. We're paying wages and benefits. I mean, as a county, are we factoring in the costs of people taking vehicles there?
So generally speaking, Bob Piff, our shop superintendent, he's come into town, I don't know about daily, but close to it for parts and supplies they need in the shop. He runs it to get what they need. So he'll pick it up and then bring it back.
So he's making a trip anyways.
Yeah,
switching
we try
vehicles?
to use it. In the winter months, we have people stationed up in Ashland. They'll grab it and run it down for us, you know, if they have to come down to High Bridge for some reason. So I would say most of the time we're not making special trips for the purpose. It's trying to dual purpose somehow.
So a question for Dan and Carolyn. Maybe the genesis of you having the HHS vehicles is Clark thinking it made sense for the county to do the maintenance. We're largely leasing vehicles now. For budget purposes, would it make sense to have these vehicles in the HHS budget? Consider leasing them?
No.
You've looked at the numbers?
No, it's leasing makes sense for the sheriff's department because those vehicles get a lot of miles. They're constantly driving and they need that extended warranty. And they need to be turned over every 4 years because they get so many miles on them and we need to make sure they work.
And they drive on the more bad roads
Right.
than,
And
Right.
the other thing
Whereas
they
If the
idle.
HHS vehicle were getting 20,000 miles a year, I'd say yes, lease it because then you're getting a lot of miles on it. But, you know, I do think I would be in favor of actually getting the minivan because of just CPS alone. That's a situation where you do never want to have a county employee driving their own vehicle. So
Mhm.
just for the county employee's safety. And there are larger families where you need to be able to have that extra space. So just for a safety point of view, I would advocate for the minivan just because we want them. And I think it does make sense the way they're doing it right now, especially the rate Highway is charging. If he's making his money back on that, then that's a great rate for HHS.
so you mentioned potentially considering another vehicle.
Mhm.
Are we looking at that in this budget?
We have not looked at it in this budget.
We just talked about it.
We just talked
yesterday.
about it yesterday. You know, I told her, you know, we can look at things to see how our equipment budget fared for 2026. You know, if there's room in it to purchase something this year yet or not, I don't know yet. Otherwise, we would have, look at other options for down the road.
Any further discussion, questions? We'll leave this as is then and then move to the next one. Oh, Matt, let me go back to highway a moment. Dick Pufall told me that Bart has been having a hard time keeping a mechanic. Have you talked to Dick or Pat Doust at all about Bart and their challenges keeping a mechanic?
I have not heard
Okay,
from either.
so why don't you talk to Bart if they're struggling to keep a mechanic, and this is totally off the top of my head.
Mhm.
They probably don't, I don't know what they pay, but apparently it's not enough.
Mhm.
And I have no idea if that's exactly one full-time job or something more or less than one full-time job. But potentially, if Bart has been struggling to keep a mechanic, that there's something that would make sense with Ashland County as far as working with Bart.
Mhm.
Just have a conversation to see
Sure.
if something makes sense, and I don't know if something will or not, but maybe something does make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility.
yeah.
They're a municipality, right, that we can work with. I mean,
But yeah, Dick, go ahead.
Yeah, Pat, could I have the floor just a second? I just talked to Pat this morning, and they have a really good candidate that came in today. He's pretty high on him. I don't know if he talked money yet or what, but I don't know anything about him, his age or where he came from or anything like that. But Pat doesn't get excited about employees too often, and he was excited about this guy. So maybe we have one on the hook, and maybe we don't.
All right.
But
So
yeah.
what Dick told me is that, Bart asked for an increase last year from its partners. And it seemed that they were going to have to offer better money for a mechanic. And did we dare consider putting more money for Bart in the budget? And I said, well, you're not going to get it if you don't ask. And if you need it, you need it. And I thought, well, maybe it makes sense to talk to Highway, but you could still talk to Bart and maybe, if this guy doesn't take it or,
sure,
maybe there's something that makes sense, but it might be a conversation worth happening and see where it goes.
sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Then we'll move on.
Right, so Sheriff's Department, Dave, are you still online?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I first want to apologize to the finance committee, Dan, Carolyn. I appreciate it. I'm currently down in Fort McCoy, and I graduate in Madison tomorrow. So I appreciate your guys' willingness to let me go online and explain some things to you guys. Do you want me to start off with the vehicles real fast, Dan, since we were on the topic of vehicles?
Sure.
Okay. So for 2027, this will be the first year we'll have 3 vehicles that were enterprise vehicles being sold. The equity of those vehicles will be placed back into the fund. It will lower the current payments, so the amounts you're looking at for monthly cost will go down. We just don't know how much because the vehicles haven't been sold yet. We're replacing it with again 4 more vehicles, 1 patrol vehicle, 1 admin vehicle, 1 investigator vehicle, and then the jail van. The jail van, we went with an all-wheel drive vehicle this year because of complaints we had in talking with our current transport deputies. So hopefully that'll work out. And then we also this year included, just because of efficiency, we included the emergency management vehicle with the fleet as well, and again, court security. I believe we can still charge mileage for the court security, working with the TAD program. So that will help out with some costs as well. So currently the total for the actual vehicles projected for the sheriff's office is 189,201 for 2027, 10,086 for the court security vehicle, and $7,066 for emergency management. Um, any questions on vehicles per se?
Dave,
I
have you talked to the sheriff about the court security vehicle?
Yesterday, I believe he was going to speak with Adam. I know that there was some hiccups with the programming.
Yes. So Sheriff Zupke has an idea that may get rid of that $10,000.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, I have not spoke with him regarding that. I also included for you guys just a little visual on the current mileage and fleet of our vehicles. We're almost there. We're over halfway, I believe. We're almost halfway between enterprise vehicles and then county-owned vehicles. We did purchase a county-owned vehicle through a grant this year, so that vehicle was a Toyota Tacoma, which we hope will last us many, many years. We know they hold their costs as well. We do keep a couple spare vehicles. I know when you look at the mileage, it looks like a lot, but those spare vehicles are needed because of potential accidents. I know once a vehicle is in an accident, we're looking at, I know it was about 2 months before we got our vehicle back. So we'd like to keep a couple spare vehicles, and the mileage on them per year, I would say roughly probably 15,000, if that. And then we also keep a spare van. The van is a Toyota Sienna. It's an all-wheel drive as well. It's been doing pretty good. We just keep that van locally though, just for inmate doctor visits, transports to court if we needed to, and yeah.
And then it's the lease van used to transport people to like Winnebago and
Yeah,
Denver?
that van's been put on higher mileage. It's used weekly for those transports. And I think what we're gonna do next year is that we had it on a 3-year rotation. We're gonna move it to a 4 or 5. And the reason why I say that is that because when you look at the mileage on those vehicles that are being leased in or being turned in, I'm sorry, and sold, is that they're currently that van is at about 67,000 miles, which is okay, but I think we can get another year out of it before we turn it back in to sell it. And those investigator vehicles and the admin vehicles, you're looking at 54,000 and you're looking at about 30,000. So I think we can get another year or two out of those in the lease, which would help us out in the bottom, the bottom end. It would help us out because obviously with the cost of vehicles, um, the maintenance plans are included in those costs.
So Dave, this is Pat. On those vehicles, you've got some older vehicles that we own, but you also want to keep them, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So when we get further down the road and those older vehicles that we own and you want to keep are just simply end of life, and we're leasing other vehicles, what's the thought on having some older vehicles available as needed? How do we get to that at that point when the current old vehicles are gone?
So I believe I think with the current vehicles, currently we have one Dodge Ram that Deputy Siegler is driving. It's at about 123,000. I think we can start replacing our older vehicles. I don't think we'll reach a point where we need to actually purchase those leased vehicles for spares until about 4 or 5 more years.
But the plan would be to purchase lease vehicles at that point to replace the current vehicles that we own that are backups are available?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I believe cost effectiveness. I think if we purchase one or two in about 4 or 5 years, it will help us maintain that. It'll help us out because you'd be purchasing a vehicle and replacing a vehicle roughly around 100,000 miles. And as you can see, we're keeping some of these vehicles for about 150 to, our last one of the vehicles we had prior years was, 160. So, yeah.
And they would have the equipment already, which is important.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the vehicles?
These costs do not include the actual upfitting. So that was another line item that was added. Your lights, your transport cages, your radios. We're currently in the process
It's
of.
a 57,000 right here, Pat.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We're currently in the process of redoing radios, so the radio costs we haven't had the need to replace actual radios yet. And I think with the congressional spending, which hopefully will be this year or early next year, we'd be able to replace our radios. Some of the equipment's old, radars and laptops, and obviously we'd like to reuse them, but I think this year or the next, their vehicle upfitters and manufacturers of the equipment, they change their product line, which changes the cost. What we like to get 4 years usually. So every vehicle about 3 years, so at least 2 rotations on the equipment if we keep to the same manufacturer vehicle. So, and these numbers will go down. Hopefully they will with the equity built in, but we can't get a solid quote on a price of a vehicle because the bidding for those newer vehicles haven't opened yet for the manufacturer. So as soon as we get those numbers to you, we'll have a more solid number for vehicle lease.
Anything else on vehicles for the sheriff's department? So we go then to your building proposal?
Yeah, one of the thought process with the building proposal is that Erica, our grant writer, right when we were doing the space study for the county, came up with we wanted to come up with a 5, 10, and 15-year plan. And one of the deficiencies with the sheriff's office is space. And we also have unused property that the county owns behind the jail lots. It's 2 city lots. I spoke briefly with the city of Ashland as far as variances, and I asked him. I said, what would it would you be willing to, gravel in a lot? Because I included some images for you guys. Uh, one of the thought process was putting a shed on that property and fence it in. Um, as you can see in some of the older Google maps, that lot's been used to store vehicles on grass and other equipment in the past. Currently, it's cleared out. We have a small trailer with all the tree limbs and brush and leaves that we collect over the year. Um, so it was a $10,000 proposal for a shed. Fencing it in, obtained two quotes. Um, the higher cost, which was included, was $68,000, but there's an alternative. The higher cost one includes two automatic gate openers, so that vehicles, big vehicles, including tow trucks, could get in the future project. I broke it down to three different phases. First phase would be just a fence in that lot, so that we can throw a shed in there for more security. And then future years, 2, 3, 4 years from now, we can, I guess, do asphalt in the orange, and that way we can at least place some vehicles on it. The city does not like gravel because of runoff, so I think the cost, or the cheaper alternative, is the blacktop asphalt.
I mean, that gravel is porous, the water will go through.
Yeah,
But their ordinance is, you're not supposed to have it on grass, but gravel, blacktop, concrete are acceptable materials for parking vehicles on. So, but the gravel is porous. I mean, for years, people would fight adding blacktop because of the runoff.
right.
But the gravel is porous. I'm not sure either they said that right or if you heard it right, but if we want gravel under the current ordinance, my understanding is that's acceptable.
Yeah, they told me that gravel is not acceptable as a parking lot for a parking lot. They said that they wouldn't allow it because of the runoff from the gravel. And I said okay, and I so I got a quote anyways, just for blacktop, and I pushed it along for a couple more years because of the cost, because the current cost, obviously, of gas, oil, and the byproducts of that. It was um it was around 57,000 or $58,910. I'm like, that can wait, you know. And so the current proposal is just for the fence and the shed to put in there. And the reason why I asked for a shed is because our current building, we're housing in our locker rooms, in our sally ports. There's a cage inside one of the sally ports. We're keeping all of our training material. We're keeping our snow blowers and our push lawnmower in a shipping container that's currently next to the generator, but it's obviously it's about 10 foot. It's about a 15 or it's a 10 foot little shipping container, and we're now housing that, um, the snow blower and the salter and the into the we're actually housing it inside the actual sally port. So it's just opening up space and then moving some of the stuff out of the locker rooms to put into the shed.
So it's good that you talked to the city. I could assume with the 8-foot fence, you need a conditional use permit for the fence being that tall.
Yes, sir.
And then in the bottom of your write-up, you have a pole. You describe it as a pole shed or a pole storage building. Ron's wife is on the city council, and the city the last few years, and I know the genesis of this, any building with steel siding, they look at closely these days. And you don't want to say pole barn or pole steel building. You don't want to start a conversation with those words, especially tucked into a residential neighborhood. So I would suggest that you get a conditional use permit for what you're proposing, the fence, and then the building, to make sure that the city is going to accept putting up the building that you want. Because what they're not going to probably let you do is put up something that literally looks like a pole barn that belongs out of town. They're going to want it to fit the neighborhood. And the city's going to have to approve that building.
Yes, sir.
right? Ron?
Yes.
One thing, if you're gonna do the blacktop, you have to have a good base. You just can't put it on top of dirt.
Right.
So you're gonna need the gravel anyway. So if you put the gravel down as part of the blacktopping, but you use it for a year or two to pack it down, I think that works.
Yeah. And they did quote me for 3 inches of blacktop because I asked them, I said, is this sufficient enough? Because I told them that there could be possible tow trucks. When I started in position, we had some storage units that were being rented out, and we kind of saved, I think it was within a 5 year span, about $8,000 in storage unit fees. So, yeah, that would actually work out. I guess we have a permit in there for blacktop. They're a year long usually, those permits.
Matt, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just a recommendation. I'm familiar with this piece. It's very soft ground. There's been vehicles parked in there before that we've helped move that it ruts really deep. So I think you're gonna want to look at doing the base work first, and it will probably be more than that asphalt cost. You're gonna have to undercut it and haul material in good gravel. Will be substantial for the base work.
Yeah, and I would agree with what Matt just said. We got an estimate to do part of the parking lot at the Mason Post Office that my mother owns, and that more than dropped our jaw. And that was like 2 years ago. And so I think what Matt just said is, I would agree with. If that base is soft, you've got some substantial money on removing material, putting in a good base so everything holds up. And then you got to make sure that the city accepts the building you're proposing too, given the residential area.
And I reached out to Bayfield County because in Grandview they recently built a substation, and it has a nice look to it. It is a metal structure, and it has the facade and brick on the second half. But that was upwards of $600,000 to $750,000 3-4 years ago. So I obviously I know that this could be a 5, 7 to 10 year plan, you know, in the future.
Yeah. But I really encourage you to talk to the planning director carefully about the building, because steel siding right now in the city is, I'll just say, a touchy subject, Ron. I think that's a safe way of putting it. And
Yes.
so talk to them first and don't say pole shed or pole barn as your first words.
And I also, just so you guys know, I did get a quote for the metal wrought iron fencing, and that was $130,000. So I wanted to, show that I went out in the manufacturer's pure fencing did send me a quote, and I just thought that was outrageous for what it is.
So as a reminder on this whole project, there's two things, if I'm not mistaken. We did a space needs study, and so identified you needed more space. So what you're proposing for an outdoor storage building for some things makes sense to address the need for space. But then we've also been looking for a building for storage, and having it right there certainly would be handy versus looking for a property somewhere else. So it's meeting two needs that have been identified for getting to be a while now.
And then when I that space needs study really opened my eyes as far as office space. So right now, currently, we don't have a space big enough to house the sheriff's office employees, everyone all together for a meeting. So we use our emergency operations center, which is a 20 by 20 office space that we used in contingencies. The proposal would, if that building would be built, would have a big enough space to house for a department meeting, and then storage, and then that would open up them and then possibly even a backup emergency operations center, which the current operations center could be used for more office space. Just an idea.
Let me back up to what Matt mentioned as far as that being a soft area. would it make sense to have Matt look at that area and give you an estimate if highway remove some material that's soft that probably should be removed and to put in an adequate base so that that packs and settles for a year or two? Could we consider having highway do that
Yeah,
if we go this direction?
yeah, that would make sense.
If I'm being honest, we don't have the levy capacity for a lot of this. And Sheriff Zupke is okay with passing on this year.
But you want that base to settle and pack.
Right. I think it's okay for Matt to go look at when he's up in Ashland sometime. So he's not going out of his way. But like I said, Sheriff Zupke's okay with postponing this project. So,
But when we get to it at some point then?
yeah, when Matt has a chance, he should definitely go look at it.
Okay.
And, I don't know, as far as the gravel goes, maybe we can buy that from the highway department.
I mean, I mean, we could do the whole project, the base
Yeah.
project for
Yeah.
sure in-house.
So, yeah, so maybe Matt, sometime we have a chance, you can go look at it, give us an estimate and, and this could be something that we consider next year when we're not so constrained on our levy. And that way, if we know we're going to do it, then Matt can plan for it and have plenty of time. And, I do think as far as storage goes too, I mean, we should look at one of the original ideas is doing storage for big items at highway. That makes sense too, because it's in the center of the county. And so vehicles that have to be impounded in Butternut or Glidden or something can go straight to High Bridge. So I think that's an option we need to flesh out too. And yeah, it's fenced already too. And we do state patrol stores vehicles there on occasion, especially now with the Line 5 they're going to be. We let other counties let their deputies drop their vehicle off there when they just for going home. So I think that's an idea we should look at for the future too.
Anything else on this topic? Then
Yes,
we'll
sir.
move to that backflow preventer.
Yes, so the backflow preventer, they did some testing and it failed. I believe Dan and Carolyn mentioned possibly using the jail assessment funds to cover the cost of the repair of that.
Dave?
Ms. Kitty, you have a question about the cost.
When I was in the Navy, I worked down in the engine room and other places, and we dealt with backflow preventers among other things. And I even worked in the storeroom ordering stuff for a while, so I knew what stuff cost. This absolutely blows me away on the price of this thing. Can you in any way, shape, or form explain why this would be so expensive?
No, I said the same thing when I looked at it and I called him because that backflow preventer is repairable. There's two flaps inside that backflow preventer, and I think they're spring operated. And it's just a matter of I was told that you could replace those in place and you don't have to take it out. Well, they want to take it out to test it and then to put it back in.
You reassemble, you do the repair work you just mentioned, and then you test it.
Yeah.
So unless the seats are damaged for some reason, like sand or something going through and they're scored and they're not working, that's one thing, but that shouldn't be the case with city water. My thought on this is, and tell me what you think is, we find a union pipe fitter and ask them what they think.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
I just, of all the stuff I've seen come through finance, I can't think of something that blew me away I kept looking at how many are there's just one. No matter how many times I looked at it, it's still one.
Just one.
And I would ask a union pipe fitter, find one of them and ask, can you take care of this for it? And that way we've got someone qualified. But this makes I know we got to do it. I just can't stomach looking at that.
Yeah. No, I'll even reach out to the company. I see that some of the labor, to me, that's a whole new assembly, not just repairing it. So I'll call and I'll ask.
All right. I'd appreciate it.
No problems. No problems.
Any other thoughts on this one? Dan? Ron is gonna leave and have some fun.
Um,
Yeah, we still have a quorum, with three of us here. Next would be the opioid funds then?
No, the
there's,
next is the jail, the, you know, the prison bars, the brain for that.
Or, it's-
Yeah, the gates.
oh, you want to go through the gates then yet?
Well, yeah, because I think this is a project that we shouldn't be waiting for. I think it's a project. I know Dave's waiting for a couple more quotes, but, and hopefully by next meeting, we can get them all. But I think there's a project we should use the jail assessment fund and fix now. Because people are getting caught in between the gates when they're closing already. And we don't want employees stuck between two bars, two closing jail bars. And we don't want the possibility of inmates jail cells opening and not being able to close. So I think this is more of a priority item than a budget item myself. And we do have money in the jail assessment fund. Caroline, how much do we have?
It's gonna be about $130,000.
So, so I would say, I would ask Dave to get more quotes and then next meeting, we look at all the quotes and we use the jail assessment fund and move ahead with this first instead of putting it in the budget. So that's,
So I have a standing item for approval to use funds and do it in 2026 as opposed to putting it in the budget.
yes, correct.
Okay. And is that timeline suitable, or do you want to?
I think it's suitable if Dave was willing to put it in next year's budget, I think we, I think we can wait a month,
Okay.
so.
Dave, does that work for you?
yeah, yeah. Do you want to give me do we give you a background on what's happening?
Yeah, or do you want to just wait for the next meeting?
Yeah, no problems.
Up to you, Mr. Kitty.
No
If
problems.
the next meeting is soon enough, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so I guess we're up to opioid funds.
The last thing for the sheriff's office was a purchase request for our equipment purchase for a drone. Just to give you a background, is that drone was the sheriff's office previously operated two drones. The newer of the two drones with obviously better imagery was used near the national forest to document some imagery of a death investigation, and the controller and the drone lost communication and basically it struck the ground. Irreparable right now. Yeah, and so purchase request was approximately, I believe, 10,745 for the drone purchase. And obviously, we use the drone purchase the drones for more than just search and rescue. We use them for investigations as well.
I want to check and see if this is eligible to use the opioid funds for. Because there's a bunch of law enforcement things
Yeah.
you can do with it.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right. Oops. So then we're ready to go to the opioid fund request.
So last year, you guys gave us $20,000 to use for the opioid funds. Talking, and that was very easily to do. Talking with Tasha and Terry again, the grant that we was fully expended already by the end of March in the first quarter. So anything that we're spending on room and board now beyond is coming out of levy. So the thought was to try to up it to see if you guys would approve up to $50,000 of any overages over the grant that we receive between now or between the end of March and the end of the year.
So this is money, one way or the other, we're gonna have to spend, if I'm understanding you.
Yes.
And we have a pot of money specifically for things such as this.
Yep.
Okay.
And Tasha will, as it comes in, like, it's got to be very specific that it could be used for the opioid fund. So it would be, make sure that it's eligible for those
So
clients.
It is eligible.
we want a motion on this then to approve it because you want to use it in this.
Well,
challenge.
we have to go to the county board because it's 50 grand. So it'd be on the 24th agenda.
So you want a motion in this meeting so that we can put it on the county board agenda?
Yes, please.
Yes. Any further questions or comments on the request for up to 50,000 in opioid funds for transitional housing? So we need a motion and a second. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Clarence makes a motion that we approve this and send it to the county board. Vic, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And then next. So Matt, last year when the board approved the budget, there's an interest in doing some things for economic development. But we also have an interest in, is it tangible? Can we measure it? Do we know we're getting something for that investment? And sometimes that's a hard question with economic development. So one of the things that I've heard people talk about, and then my experience cleaning up, at the farm, I've gotten rid of lots of concrete. I know it's expensive to have it hauled away, and I know the further it gets hauled, the more expensive, obviously. It's nice when it gets crushed and reused from an environmental standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. So my question for highway is, do you think it makes sense to have a place where contractors and the public can dump concrete or rocks that would make sense for the county, at least as a break even, but preferably better in terms of materials and in the big picture, but also then supports our contractors because it makes it better for them as far as how far they're hauling material to dispose of it.
I mean, we currently have in Highbridge up County C in our yard out there, we have a pile of asphalt and concrete that we generate ourselves. I've been here since 2013. We haven't crushed it yet, but it just keeps building. I would be open to others hauling into there. It would just be, free material for the highway department. Eventually, obviously, we got to crush it, but I mean, it's very good material. So I wouldn't be opposed to that.
So if it works for you, we could let the public know and, obviously don't want other materials or not much other stuff in there. What about something closer to Ashland where there's, a lot more building and stuff like that? Because that 18 miles from Ashland to there, it's cost prohibitive.
Yeah. I guess I'd have to think about it a little bit. I mean, highway doesn't have room at our Ashland shop for anything. We're very limited in space. So I don't know if there's any other county owned property that it would be feasible to use for that. I mean, I would be open to looking at something if it's available.
Yeah, I just caution everyone. If you build it, they will come. And if it's not supervised,
Yeah.
who prohibits me from coming and dumping stuff that's not concrete? And then concrete comes in a lot of forms, a lot of rebar, a lot of wire mesh, what could be taken, what can't be. I think we need to check out, okay, who's going to monitor me coming in?
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's not monitored, if it's just an open source, that becomes an issue. And then what could you really take or what would you want? You want some backyard deck patio concrete that's all full of mesh? Can that be taken or not? So I guess we'd have to look at that because the cost of, I mean, I don't just concrete out like off a road. That has wire in it too, but
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my Highbridge site is fenced, so I would want to do it at a, they'd have to ask permission and we would have to open the gate. So I would want to see what kind of material they're coming in with. But as far as the steel, some of that doesn't matter. The crushers these days have big magnets on them. They go through the jaw crusher. They don't like to see a huge amount of rebar. mesh isn't so bad it, goes through there and then the big magnet picks it out before it goes further into the crusher. So you can work around that somewhat, but.
So the Ashland site on Sanborn Avenue there, top of the hill, I've dropped lots of concrete there, just coming and going. And there's there was lots of rebar in there. There was wire mesh and, other stuff. And they crushed that whole pile there, separated out the scrap iron, and some of it had a fair bit of metal in it. But when I got permission, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago, when I started dropping stuff, they asked me not to drop anything with metal, which for me worked, the odds and ends I was cleaning up. And then a year ago, whoever owns it now, I had to call 2 people, but they gave me permission to drop concrete there. But there's still concrete that's being dumped in there, with some metal, but it's accumulating. And I don't know if the city's dropping it there or not, but I don't think the contractors are able to use that site. So part of what happens is, I know we're told it's got a site in the town of Lincoln, and eventually they'll crush. And now they've got one out on 118. But there's other guys, they dump it, wherever they can, and out in the back ravine, or it piles up somewhere. And, long term, it's one of the legacy costs where land is tied up because someone has dumped concrete there, or maybe they didn't clean up concrete, especially from farms.
Sure.
And the further this got to go, the more cost prohibitive it is. So there's some benefits to this if we can find one or more sites where people can drop it. And the Ashland site, for years, that was open. It wasn't monitored. There was no gate. And then after it was sold and they crushed, they put 2 big tires there to block it at the end of the season. But now those tires are separated, so you can still drive in there and drop. There's very rarely anything in there other than concrete or bricks, some form of, masonry that seems appropriate. So I don't have a big concern about, as long as the location is such that it's not a place where people drive off the road, have parties.
Sure.
And, dump trash, but it's in some ways visible enough that, people aren't going to congregate, or be easy for the sheriff driving by to notice if there's something going on that shouldn't go on. But if we can find a site, so some of the contractors have told me that really, really be very, very helpful to them. And they're also reluctant to drop it on someone else's site because of liability concerns.
Sure. One of the things, with our hybrid site, yeah, it is, like you say, 18 miles, but it is fairly close to the major gravel pit in the county. So, possibly they could drop the concrete, pick up a load of gravel on their way back, so they wouldn't be, wasting a full trip. I guess they're coming there a lot anyway.
So in fact, if you let contractors know that that's an option, you might get more business.
Okay.
So, but if you find something close to Ashland, let us know. That might make sense, Carolyn.
Yeah, just 2 things. I do want to reiterate that we want to make sure we're not getting things we don't want dumped, and there will be, a cost for staff to watch that. So that's something to be cognizant of. I also just wanted to ask generally, who does the crushing? Like, are we bringing in a contractor with their equipment to do the crushing? Is that how that works?
Yes.
Or is it something we have to?
We do not have the equipment to do that, so
Okay.
we would be hiring that out. Yes.
Okay. And so we just want to make sure that we have a cost estimate on that too, and it'll go up every time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
yeah.
like I say, we've been collecting, we have a pretty good sized mountain going of
Mhm.
mainly asphalt, but some concrete. So at some point we will need to crush that
Do
down
it
to
anyway.
usable material.
So if there's some way, whether it's existing sites or partnering somehow, and I don't know what the city is doing right now, if they've got permission to dump up there or not. But if there's some way that we can help contractors and the public with this issue of concrete and reuse more, that would be something of interest to look into.
Okay.
Okay. Then we'll move to the next one.
This is just a standing agenda item.
So the concrete really fits into this, looking for ways to support economic development, because this is the finance, and we rarely say and economic development committee. And we're looking for ways and open to suggestions on things that we can do or do differently to support economic development. But there's an interest in, something pretty tangible where we can have a sense of or understanding or measurables on what we're doing instead of writing checks and not really having any sense of where's the benefit to that. So, and one of the things that is possible is our trails from a standpoint of, we know tourists come here and spend money when there's trails. I don't know, I'm just starting to look at more of that information. Mary McFetrich dropped off some information before the meeting. I don't have a snowmobile or UTV. I know there's trails. I look online at maps once in a while to see where those things are. But I know people spend money, but it's also important for families and especially for younger people that there's something to do here in Ashland County for them to stay. And so trails are part of that. And, highway, you get out and about it quite a bit, but you also have equipment that might make sense for working with trails or helping to support trails. And so if you see of ways where we might make some changes or improvements or additions with things like trails or other things that from an economic development standpoint have an impact, we'd be interested in talking about those things or just anything else that comes to mind. All right.
Investments, we're doing pretty well. We haven't spent any of the money yet, so I mean, it just keeps growing. Interest rates are steady. Most of these are long-term bills. The interest rate is lower. I mean, they're still from COVID. So, but the newer ones are doing pretty well. We do expect interest rates to stay the same, or at least I do expect them to go up. So I think we'll continue to do pretty well on this.
Yes, it is certainly to have more money invested than we did a number of years ago. And the bank has been, good about working with us.
Yeah, they give us a decent rate and then they give us a decent loan rate when we do our levy.
Yeah. So Matt, on that mini excavator, 200,000 at 3% is, $6,000 a year. So consider whether renting initially, if that's an option, makes sense versus owning and having a depreciating asset, how much you're going to use it. But some of this stuff, now that we have a finance director, maybe we can better understand when does it make sense to rent versus own, because that's the whole thing with vehicles. What's, best and how much you might use that, we may not necessarily know right now, but maybe renting one to start with and finding out how much you like or don't like a particular one. You might say, I'd like a little bigger, smaller, some different features. And that is one advantage of renting is.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest disadvantage of renting is availability. And then you rent it for a time period, say a week. And if you get weather, you still pay it, whether you can use it or not. And then having the right attachments for it. So somewhat this was based on Bayfield County has purchased 2 of them in the last 4 or 5 years, and they use them a lot, and they talking to them with how they use them and what they do, it sounds like it would be very beneficial for us. So
Okay. All right, then we'll go to, unless there's anything else on this, we'll go to sales tax.
Sales tax, numbers are all over the place, but we're generally ahead of last year. I mean, I can attribute some of the stuff to, like the April numbers. I know a whole bunch of guys were here cutting trees for the pipeline, spending a lot of money. I expect these sales tax numbers to shoot through the roof in the summer once the actual construction starts. I will note that a lot of hotels have long-term bookings, more than 30 days. They still have to pay sales tax, but after 30 days, they don't pay room tax, which affects the city. So I know they're all full. I mean, Carol and I the other day looked it up, and it's $600 a weekend if you can find a room. So, yeah, it's a Super 8. So I only expect that number to go higher too. So I think I think we'll have a great sales tax summer. I just don't know how many tourists will be here. But it will help all of our local businesses either way. So,
Yeah, I know Super One is busy with construction workers, so when it gets to the late afternoon,
well, they are, the gas stations are, the restaurants are, everybody. I mean, I know Jerry's telling me he's already at last year's numbers at Taste of Wisconsin, so. And then we have last year's final full numbers on here just for reference, so everybody knows. So last year we did finish above our budgeted amount. Barely, but we did. And for this year, if you go back, we actually lowered that amount budgeted. So we should very well exceed that.
any questions or comments on the sales tax? Then moving to administrator reports or updates.
Okay, so Caroline, Sue, and I have been starting to work on the budget. Starting to see a lot of big holes. A lot of like, we don't have enough money for this. So I can say this committee's gonna have to do saying a lot of no this summer. I know it's not gonna be popular, but the money's just not there. I don't know, Steve, can you explain why our debt levy is limited this year? Because I still don't understand it.
Sure. So we took that carry forward amount as part of the budget for 2026 when we adopted the budget and set the levy. And that had a statutory requirement. One of the things was that the county had to be at or below the debt, total outstanding debt from, and DOR, this is where DOR interpreted it, is it says current year and prior year in the statute. DOR has interpreted current year for the purposes of that statute as the budget year that you're budgeting. So in this case, it would be 2026. So 12/31/2026, general obligation debt amount that's outstanding has to be equal to or less than your prior year, which would be 12/31/25. I think there are some tools that we can use to manage that. If, I've certainly heard the discussion here on a lot of these capital things, and I think it is good to set priorities and potentially scale back to fit within. There could be an option too of, the county typically borrows in December and does a debt levy and then pays it off in February of the next year. That amount would be there on 12/31/2026 that you would be judged on. However, your judgment is only on 12/31/26. You could borrow money in January of 27, and there's no restriction going forward. It's just a 1-year look back for this exception, and then you're good to go. You couldn't pay that one off though in February because you wouldn't have the funds. You'd have to take the note out and let it run for a year, but you would have options to potentially, mitigate anything if you couldn't fit it the box within the framework of what is there because of the carry forward restriction. Does that make sense, Dan?
Yeah, it does. It just didn't make sense when I saw it in writing.
Yeah. It is what it is. I guess we, took that carry forward exception and now we just got to play by the rules. But I think, like I said, there are things that if we needed to, we just have to comply on 12/31/26. If you didn't comply, you'd be risking DOR checking on it and then potentially taking that levy away, which I don't think we want to risk. So, but that certainly is an option too. So,
would they take it away or would they just take it out of shared revenue?
Well, they'd probably reduce your shared revenue. Either way, it's either they're pulling it back, right?
Right. So one of the things Caroline and I have been talking about is exactly that. What can we, if something's really important, if we have a whole bunch of things that we can't fit, what do we look at doing next year? And so like some of the computers Austin wants, maybe he's not going to replace them until summer of next year. So maybe if we need to, we borrow money next summer to cover those computers. Yes, that would go on the 27 debt levy but it would give us more room to maneuver this year. So we've been talking about how do we fit everything into that box? So that's sort of what we're working on right now.
So this is Pat. So Steve, when you explained this last fall, the intent of what the DOR does on that, my understanding was, is they want to make sure that a local unit of government isn't putting an unreasonably large tax increase, going forward. So they make you live within those boundaries, in this case. So we knew that, but given that consequence, it really drives home the point that we want to use our full levy limit each year and not have to go through this, in the future. Otherwise, we've got this to deal with. But, the other part of, if we need to, we've got some money invested. We've talked about developing a fund balance policy. We have a target on what we would like to have set aside. And the question we haven't answered yet is, if we pull some money out of our savings, how do we replace it? That's not the easy question. But I say this because we actually do have some money that we could use. So if we really got to a point where we got to, do we borrow for this in one of the ways mentioned, or do we use some money that we have, some contingency? That's an option too, to fill a small gap.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think we do have to start, at least for this year, because this is a really tough year, and we do have to consider looking at interest earned on the income as and treat that differently than the actual money we have. Just like when people retire, they have an income fund where they just keep paid off the interest. I think we could consider that interest for 1 year only, because it's going to be tough, as spendable money. That way we're still not touching the balances, and they're still going to continue to grow. But, we're using money that was given to us on the balance. And, we're not in the business of actually accumulating wealth like a private entity. I mean, we're here to provide services and do what the taxpayers expect. So if we have to, on a one-time basis, use things like interest, I think that's something we should look at.
And doing that could be part of our fund balance policy of, we've got some money, and so if we use interest or part of the interest, that would be part of the policy. We make that money available, but yet we're still growing those funds over time, because we always want that fund to be a certain percentage of our budget.
Right. So it just gives us an extra revenue source if we need it, is what yeah. And I think I do have some examples of fund policies that just came over my administrator's email group this week. So I'll save all those for the next meeting, and we can put them in the packet, or I can email them to the committee if you want them way ahead of time to look.
If you have them, you could send them to us.
Yeah, we'll do that. And that way, at least you have an idea what other counties are doing.
Anything else on administrator updates?
No.
Do we want to set a next meeting date?
Yes, we probably want one for next month. Let me get a calendar. So July. Actually, let me look at the calendar. Do you want to do July 23rd? That would be the third Thursday. Do you want to do July 16th, the second Thursday? Or the 30th?
So from a budget preparation standpoint, when do you hit another point where?
July 31st, I believe, is the operating budget's due. I'm sorry?
Just remember that ours is gonna go to our board at the August meeting. I can get you numbers, but
Right,
then it won't be
yeah, I mean, I
approved
think we'd
until
like to see the
August.
numbers.
Yeah.
And even if you go to HHS a little bit later,
Yeah,
it gives us, this committee, a chance to start. So do you want to give Amber time? Do you want to say July 30th?
July 30th?
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with going earlier than doing 2 meetings, to be honest. Yeah, it would be after,
So
Yeah. yeah, the board would be the 28th.
Dan, this
Yes,
is
sir.
Steve. I'm not available on the 30th, but I don't know if Mike is. He's on the call here, but just to let you know that.
Okay,
I mean, what about the 16th?
yeah, the 16th is good too. I mean, we didn't have operating budgets done, but we're gonna meet again in August anyhow.
July 16?
Yeah.
July 16 then.
All right, Lori, can you please reserve the room for July 16 at 9 o'clock?
Will do.
Thank you.
So now, did we come up with a real date or what?
July 16th, Dick.
Okay, we'll put that down.
All right.
And then a motion to adjourn. We have a motion to adjourn. Dick, is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.